September 30, 2022. Putin illegally proclaims annexation of 4 occupied regions. Ukraine applies to join NATO. In the Kremlin, the Russian leader held a grand ceremony in which he vowed to use all available means to defend the 4 regions he was co-opting. "This is the will of millions of people," Putin said Friday, words that few outside Russia see as credible for a move condemned in the West as a brazen and illegal land grab. They made their choice to be with their people, to be with their motherland. His speech was followed by Moscow-installed leaders of Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson and Zaporizhia signing documents proclaiming them part of Russia, before joining hands with Putin and singing the national anthem. Minutes later, Zelensky posted a surprise online video announcing, "We are taking our decisive step by signing Ukraine's application for accelerated accession to NATO." Joining the alliance has been a goal of Kyiv's for years, and would give it the protection of collective defense promised by Washington and others. In reality, a number of hurdles stand in its way. While not being NATO allies, the US and others have provided billions of dollars of military support for Ukraine as well as multiple rafts of sanctions. On Friday it responded to Putin's statement with another salvo, imposing economic and visa sanctions on hundreds of Russian and Belarusian officials, their family members and businesses. "We will hold to account any individual, entity, or country that provides political or economic support for Russia's illegal attempts to change the status of Ukrainian territory," Secretary of State Antony Blinken said in statement. Meanwhile in Europe, leaders issued a statement after Putin's speech saying they reject and unequivocally condemn the illegal annexation by Russia, which not only violated Ukraine's rights, but also put global security at risk. It comes after votes were staged in the 4 regions that were widely criticized as rigged and preordained. Russian-installed local officials were accompanied by armed personnel going door to door. As well as announcing the annexation, Putin has partially mobilized his military, prompting domestic blowback and an exodus of Russians fleeing the draft, and ramped up his nuclear threats against Ukraine and the West. The moves are seen as a wider escalation after a series of punishing battlefield defeats at the hands of a lightning counteroffensive by Kyiv. Putin delivered his barnstorming speech Friday to hundreds of officials and other dignitaries, some in suits, some in military uniforms, at a lavish ceremony under the giant, gold chandeliers of Georgievsky Hall, in the Great Kremlin Palace. After briefly welcoming the 4 new regions, he went on to discuss centuries of Russian history in which he railed against Western colonialism, and Satanism, drawing a standing ovation. The packed audience had earlier stood for a minute's silence as Putin hailed the Russian heroes who have died in the war, which he calls a special military operation. A stage was set up in Moscow with giant video screens and billboards proclaiming the 4 areas part of Russia. The Kremlin will celebrate its claim over what amounts to as much as 15% of Ukraine, with a pop concert on the city's iconic Red Square. But underscoring the disconnect between Friday's ceremonies and the ongoing chaos and bloodshed of the war, hours earlier a missile attack on a convoy of cars traveling from Ukrainian-held land in Zaporizhia to Russian-occupied areas killed at least 23 people, local officials said. It was also clear that annexation does not mean control. Thousands of Russian troops in the strategic city of Lyman in the eastern Donetsk region were on the verge of being encircled by Ukraine, according to the Institute for the Study of War, a U.S.-based military think tank, and other observers. Rob Lee, a military analyst chronicling the conflict, tweeted Thursday that the Lyman pocket could collapse at any time, which would overshadow the annexation announcement. It was unclear whether Putin was laying claim to all of the 4 regions, or just those parts firmly controlled by his military. Western governments, officials and experts have openly regretted not responding with tougher measures when Russia annexed the Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea in 2014.